ashes burn in the stone, and night it's our turn.
Like a star, you can't stop my shine. I'm loving Cloud City, my head's in the sky. I'm solo, I'm running solo, I'm running solo, I'm running solo.
What's up, everybody? It's Loopy here at Late Night Gaming, and we are here after a short break for the set change for the Han Yellow Masterclass. And if you haven't seen the results from the first couple of tournaments here in set one, Mono High-End is now a thing. And we're joined by Ian, who goes by BN Legopizza. How you doing, Ian?
What's up, everybody? Good to be here. Thanks for having me, Loopy.
And Troy Yamaguchi. How you doing, Troy?
Hey there. Appreciate it.
All right. So you guys had some, pretty okay results with this deck. Why don't you start with Ian? How did Baltimore go?
Yeah, so Baltimore was like the first big tournament near me for set 2, and I'd been testing this Han Yellow deck for a decent amount of time, probably since like midway through spoilers. I started like updating deck lists and stuff, and then once the full spoilers were out, just really went to town. So I had a lot of testing going into it. We kind of had like a week of results from a couple ancillary tournaments. Saw that Palpatine was really good. Saw that Sabine was really good. Saw that Palp Yellow was really good. No huge surprises. And then I was tweaking this Yellow Han deck pretty much to beat those 3 decks, and played 2 days at the Baltimore SCG Baltimore. There was 3 days. I didn't get to play on Friday, but there was Saturday and Sunday. Saturday was a 2K. There was like 60-ish people, and then Sunday was a 1K. There was like 25-ish people, and I ended up winning both. So it was pretty sweet. I was actually so confident in this deck that I had texted multiple friends who were going to the SCG event to play Magic.
That's broken.
I knew that they were going to play Magic already, but I hadn't talked to them in a bit. So I was like, "Hey, are you going to SCG Baltimore?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, I plan on playing the Magic like 10K or something." And I just go, "Yeah, I plan on winning the Saturday 2K and the Sunday 1K." And then I did.
Yep. Okay. So that's pretty good. And then I met you at Gencon. You did well there. You had a top cut on this deck as well there, Ian.
Yeah. So day 1 and 2, I actually went to Gencon not thinking I was going to play any of the large events because I didn't have any tickets going into it. But I was able to scrounge around and get some tickets for all 3 days. And the first 2 days pretty much played my exact same list. Had like 1 card different in the sideboard. Did not do well. Went like X3 both days. And then the last day changed it up. Kind of had a new version of the deck. Barely any testing on it. Like I played some games against a buddy who was just jamming green Palp against me, and ended up getting 8th. So.
And then
pretty good.
Troy, I met you at Gen Con. I don't think we played against each other. We sat next to each other, one day, but you actually won the first day of Gen Con undefeated.
Yeah, I did all right. Same as Ian, kind of. I didn't have a ticket or anything. I was relying totally on my friends to like bail me out. It was the type of thing where like one of them had a ticket for Thursday, but they hadn't played the game since set 1, so they're like, you know what, here you go, just like cash me out. I was like, I got you. So that was Thursday, and then Friday, I was just like in line with my friends that had tickets already, and some guy was like, oh hey, I actually can't play this. Like, do you just want to get this off me? I was like, I kind of want to run around the con and do other stuff, but like, I don't know. They're just like, you gotta run it back. I was like, okay, sure, I'll do it.
So you played Thursday and went undefeated on your buddy's ticket, is what I heard.
Yeah, no, like that was Brendan's ticket. That guy's the goat for hooking me up with that.
Yes, shout out to Brendan.
Very good of him.
Make it happen. All right, so before I talk about this deck, I mean, how did you guys actually come to Star Wars Unlimited? You've played other competitive card games before?
Yeah, I'm like the prototypical disenfranchised Magic player. Played competitive Magic for a long time. Never went to like a Pro Tour or anything, but kind of just grinded like the SCG circuit the last like 5 or 6 years. More so before COVID. And then, just kind of felt like I was not really into Magic anymore, and started dabbling in other card games, but I'm like a huge Star Wars nerd. So when I like heard the rumblings that this even existed, I actually bought tickets and a flight to Gen Con last year to just demo the game,
That's
which was
crazy.
Oh, do you do?
like literally less than a month before the event. So I paid like way too much money for everything, and I was just like, I don't care. I just want to
Worth it.
go and figure out if this game's cool. And
So you
pretty
got
much
one of
went
the
to
fancy
Con.
Lucre Vaders from that.
Yeah, I got 3 of them because I did like 3 different promo events. So
Yeah,
it was
That's
fun.
sweet.
At this year, I actually had Tyler Parrott, Ryan, and most of the design staff sign my Hyperspace Vader, so that was
Oh,
good.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
I should have done that.
yeah, hopefully I can figure out how to make that deck S tier again. I did that a lot set 1, but it's Sabine got better, which is a problem.
Yep.
All right, Trey, how did you find Star Wars Unlimited?
Yeah, so I'm like a kind of a newer card game player. I started during coronavirus as just like a thing to do. I was like completely terrible. Like the first card game I played was Yu-Gi-Oh! Just because like growing up that was the thing that we did. So I was like, oh, I'll try to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Now. Like I like downloaded the PC game or something, which didn't even have like an updated card pool or whatever. It was totally like just doing it for fun. And then at some point I ended up, once locals started opening up again, just heading down just for a sense of community and like, you know what, like I haven't like done anything competitive in a long time, so like I just want to try to like grind it out and get good. So like that's my background in terms of competitive card games, was playing a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh, which was like, it maybe gave me brain damage or something, but it gives you a very specific way of looking at games to where like, number one, you have to always be like really on edge because Yu-Gi-Oh! I call it like the Marvel versus Capcom of card games. Like you make one mistake, you just get comboed for 30 minutes and die. You like do one single thing wrong. You like build your deck wrong, you just explode. It's very low margin for error. So you always have to like be very deliberative about what you're doing, and you always have to be sure that what you're doing is worth doing. So I kind of take that approach with me to every card game that I play, to where like I always want to be sure like everything I'm doing is like a good reason in terms of any technical play decision or deck building decision. That's been like really good for me in terms of thought process. So from Yu-Gi-Oh, I got tired of like winning rubber mats and deck boxes, so I went to go play Battle Spirit Saga, which had a huge cash pricing. I wasn't able to play that as much as would have liked. Like there's just every time a major tournament would come around, there would be like some random horrible thing in my personal life that like prevented me from testing at all. So like I would just have to go to my friends and like be like, "Yo, can I steal your homework? Like, can you, like let's just what deck are you guys playing? Like just put me in." And just kind of I'm like reading my cards during the event. I'm like, oh my god, this is awful. But like that was a really fun experience. The Battle Spirits community was very tight knit, and there was literally like no casuals. It was just all competitive, like people just trying to get paid out. So it was like I don't even know if it was like a high level of play, but like the people that were good at that game were like real. They were like dogs. Like the people that were good at that game are like some of the best card players I've met. So from there, like a lot of them, you know, like, hey, the Star Wars game looks pretty cool. It like carries over some of the things we enjoyed about Battle Spirits, about the decision making of that game. So that's how I found Star Wars, was just kind of, you know, migrating from different card games, and I'm like a card game refugee of some kind.
My wife used to play Yu-Gi-Oh. How do you feel about the design of Star Wars Unlimited?
I think so.
Outside of the theme and the skin.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. So coming from Yu-Gi-Oh, Yu-Gi-Oh is like a very mechanics-based game. It's all about interactions and like very interesting plays and like using the rules to your advantage to accomplish like, you know, max value out of your cards. It's very technical. You have to remember combos. You have to know like how to interrupt your opponents very specifically, like what they're trying to do. Star Wars has none of that. Star Wars is all like a decision tree game, to where you look at your 6 cards in your hand. You're like, all right, I'm playing one of these this turn. One of these, what do I want to play this turn? Right? You look at your hands, like, is there anything in here I want to play in 5 turns? Right? It's just, it's more of like just making incrementally good decisions. It was really interesting. So when I started playing Star Wars, I could never figure out why I was losing. I was like, I don't know what went wrong this game. It was just so strange. I was like, how in the world am I so far behind, right? But the more you play it, the more you're like, I see what happened, right? Like resourcing this pump, like all those turns ago, is what, you know, kept me from being able to kill their leader, and like they just got too much value.
And you took the the words out of my mouth. I mean, I'm sure that I spend more time thinking about my resource decision than all of my like in-turn decisions
It's the
Fine.
most important skill by far, is knowing what to resource and what to keep, when to mull hands.
I would say it was. Now that we have smuggle cards.
Oh, true. We don't have to dig. I just, boom.
It's still important to think about that as you're resourcing.
But true.
You know,
Yeah,
too,
for
but-
If they're playing green, I get scanning officered for 3. I'm pissed.
Yep.
Yeah.
and there's this aspect we've talked about in several masterclass that, I mean, you kind of can get rewarded for, you know, running some of the high risk, you know, but niche cards, you know, sometimes because, I mean, you still have the ability to make it a resource in those other matchups.
Exactly, right? You're never screwed out of your ability to play the game.
Right. And it's really sad watching some games, you know, Magic is the third.
Oh yeah, you're just, I can't even play.
And then, you know, there's a final, you know, all of this, you know, competitive build up to it, and it gets decided by being mana screwed, which is just not going to happen in Star Wars. All
Well,
right.
sometimes you can miss the 2-drop, pretty sad, but
Yeah,
You can still dead draw, but I mean, it's far less.
One of the ways that I view the game, I kind of do this as like when I talk to my friends who like haven't really been in the game or haven't tried it out yet. The way I try to sell them on it is that this game is Hearthstone chess.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like it kind of gets the best of both worlds from both of those things, because like the analytical chess mind of like action versus action, like I move my pawn, they move their bishop.
yeah, I got to ping the
then-
guy. hmm
Right, yeah, and then with Hearthstone, if people have played Hearthstone, it's the combat's very similar, where damage stays on the unit. You have a leader that has an ability, so it's kind of like the best of both worlds with those two games.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I think we were talking about that at whatever bar that was that we were at after Gen Con, you know, Saturday night. But I mean, it's like Hearthstone and Magic had a baby. You know, it would be.
Yeah,
And then they had lightsabers added to them.
Yeah. No, awesome. Like, what more could you ask for?
Right. All right. So tell me how you came to Mono Han. You're actually part of a testing group, Ian.
yeah. So this was actually before I had joined the Bothan Network. So shout out to the Bothan Network guys, because they helped me a lot at Gen Con, especially coming to that second version of the deck. But the original version of the deck was kind of like a baby of mine from set 1. In set 1 I pretty much only played cunning decks for a while. And then when the hard control decks started popping up, I stopped playing Boba Yellow because I just couldn't win against those like Iden blues or like Vader blues. It was really, really tough. They just outvalue you and will heal enough to like kind of make your cunnings not do a lot. And so I switched to playing Han because of the interaction with the droids and Ezra, and then I was playing You're My Only Hope, which is a really funny card that is definitely a meme. But in my defense, in set 1 there wasn't a lot of cards, and I did have a lot of
True.
I had a lot of top of my deck manipulation, right? So like the droids let you look at your top card, Ezra lets you look at your top card. So you could kind of set up a turn where, you know, you attack with an Ezra, you see like a Han unit, you can't play it, but you have 5 resources, you play You're My Only Hope, you play a Han unit really.
Listen, man, my favorite YouTube short of anybody is still Bobby Sapphire's Casino Han short. You know.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what that one's about. You know, to just play
Yeah,
sevens. Just play sevens. But
Yeah. So I had this.
take
I was
us
gonna
into
say,
set 2. How did
Yeah.
how-
So going into set 2, I had been looking at the spoilers a lot. I kind of was thinking I wanted to just build a Kylo deck because I thought it'd be like a cool like red yellow aggro Kylo, but I kept like not really finding a groove and couldn't really beat set 1 decks that were just getting like better cards. And so the last legendary to be spoiled was DJ, and that card was like what I thought the set 1 Yellow Han was missing, because you needed another 7-drop. Like Han unit wasn't doing enough of a job because it's not great in every matchup, and so I wanted another 7-drop, and lo and behold, we got an amazing one in DJ. I also already was on the plan that Tech was like, in my opinion, the best card from set 2. It's just so broken, and it fixes that hard control matchup because now you have late game inevitability after they super laser blast.
Yeah, and I was following along as well. I mean, you guys are the first masterclass for Only Han's Week, you know, so that's cool. But I made an intentional decision to delay these until set 2 when I saw actually DJ's reveal, and then somebody texted me and DM'd me how that worked with Tech. because
Oh yeah.
I mean it's just a strong combo, and we'll talk all about that.
The funny part is when I was testing the deck at the very beginning, I didn't realize that Tech would discount DJ's smuggle because I didn't know that they could stack. So I was just playing it as if it was 7, and it was still good. Like it was winning me games. Like I was testing against my two of my really good friends, and I just kept winning. And we were like convinced that other people knew about this deck, and they just weren't posting anywhere about it online because they wanted to keep it secret. But then like by the time Baltimore came and I played it, like I was playing Tech DJ against people for the first time. They had no idea what was going on. So it was pretty crazy.
All right, what about you, Troy? How'd you come to Mono Han? Decide to run it at
I had like the complete opposite journey. So like set 1, I just played everything I can get my hands on. Number 1, because like the cards on release were cheap. Now quickly that became not the case, but luckily I was able to get them all fairly easily. So I played all sorts of decks set 1, just tried to get a good feel for what was good. In terms of coming into set 2, I mean I kind of just stole Ian's homework, to be completely honest, in terms of Yellow Han. We didn't know the deck existed. I had the complete opposite reaction. When I read DJ, I was like, this card sucks. I was like, pay 7 to smuggle it? Like, this is ass. Why would I ever play this horrible card? But like, when you tested it, and like, I just have to thank my like testing group for this, because they were the ones that like saw the list, tried it out, and were like, oh no, this has legs. Just like play it once or twice, you'll see the vision. Like when you looked at it, I was just like, what is this deck? Like, you got this all these weird combos. You got like the droids in there. You got like Tech DJ. I was like, is this just like some meme where I'm trying to draw like these inconsistent 2-card combos? Like that doesn't sound very good. But like when I played the deck, when we took out some of the like combo-ish cards and just left the Tech DJ shell, I was like, oh no, this is literally just mono boba, but with different cards and like a combo win condition, right? So you have all of the broken like double yellow staples. You have the Bodhi's, you have the Cantina Bouncer and Cunning, of course. And like those alone give the deck enough of a like quality backbone to where you're winning more games off of that. And then just like in the background, in the back of their mind, every time they see tech on your board, they just like have to blink, because if they don't, the game just has a 35% chance to just end immediately. So I was like, oh no, like this deck is actually really good. Like I see, what makes this deck powerful now. So like that was my journey to finding this deck. I was like totally prepared to play like anything else at Gencon. And we learned about it. It was Tuesday when the list became public and they had tried it for the first time. That's when it's like, give this a shot. I think it's really good. I played it literally twice. I was like, this is broken. Like I'm just smuggling like infinite plus off the top of my deck. I'm like chucking a 5/5 in space out of my resource. Like, what is this? This is just absurd. Like no other deck is doing this. It's just most aggressive, pretty good grind game, like really strong top end in the Han unit. It was just everything you wanted. So I was like, okay, no, this deck is good.
And you mentioned before recording that you and your content or your testing group are starting to do a little bit of content.
Yeah, so we have a channel. It's called +2. A lot of us come from other card games. We all love like the technical play aspect of the game. So like proper sequencing, proper deck building, ratios, math, all of that like stuff that if you play a lot of card games, you get like an intuitive feel for it. Metagame as well, like how to pick a good deck into a field. You do things like you operationalize, like I expect to play this many Sabine, I expect to play this many blue-green villain, I expect to play this many cutting decks, right? And based on your expectations, making a good choice for a tournament. Those are all things that interest us, and I think that are not currently being discussed in the Star Wars Unlimited field, just because a lot of the field, they come from either, like a lot of people come from board games, a lot of people come from like other Star Wars products, right? It's like not this like very sweaty, I guess you could say, like tournament card game environment. So that's what we're looking to bring, and of course, like all the standard stuff, like tier list, deck lists, all of that kind of thing. So,
well, I look forward to that. I told you that I shared with you. I come from a poker background, where there's like a lot of math for good players. And, I can tell you that we have a guest, Nerd Parker. Those guys, he runs the SWDB, but he's also a big math guy as it comes to cards.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But all right, well, let's get to the decks. So start with this. This is your deck from Baltimore, Ian?
Yep. Yeah, I played the same list both days.
So tell me about this in broad strokes.
Okay, so the broad strokes was there's a broken combo with Tech and DJ where you get to steal a resource for 5 resources of your own.
And then destroy it with Han's ability.
Yes.
Well, also
so
allows
rude.
you to play your leader right away too, which is like
Right.
super important.
Mm.
Because your leader comes out at 6, so you get to develop your leader right afterward. If they don't disrupt the combo, you get to attack again, and then you can spend 2 resources to play like a 2-drop or something. Um, so the backbone is kind of like you have this really broken combo where 30% of the time you're just going to win a game. It obviously depends on the deck, and the more that people know about it, the more they can try to disrupt it. But that was the core of it, and then the shell around it is the way that I had viewed it for going into Baltimore was I want to minimize the Han card disadvantage by activating him, and then I want to disrupt their hand so that they can't disrupt my combo. Um, and then obviously play all the good double yellow cards that existed from set 1. So the droids are weird. I know a lot of people don't like them. I even cut R2 like when I would sideboard pretty much in every matchup. But I think when you go into a tournament and you go into like playing a random deck, uh, the way that you should have your deck built up, especially if you like consider yourself a combo deck, is you want to be as linear as possible in terms of getting to like whatever game plan you have. And so for this, the game plan was I want to have a lot of card draw to be able to get my combo consistently, and I want to have a lot of hand hate to make sure it doesn't get disrupted. So the droids are there because it gives you card advantage.
One
One
way
of my favorite.
one way to look at Han leader is that he turns card advantage into resource advantage.
Exactly.
With his
Gives you more
ability.
card activity,
So
which is what a lot of decks lack in Star Wars Unlimited, right? It's like 1 card per turn decks. Like the Rey, Kira type decks. It's like they're playing 1 card per turn. Everything else
Yeah,
is just
yeah.
locked up there, not doing anything.
Yeah, and the Han ability gets, I think it's the most broken on turn 1, right? Because
Yeah.
the amount that you go from 2 to 3 is way more than going from like 4 to 5 or 5 to 6. And so the whole concept here was that I wanted a lot of really good turn 1 plays, and the droids made that way easier because you could play R2, look at the top card of your deck, which can influence what card you'll resource from like activating Han. Like let's say you have like a Bodhi in your hand and you see a Bodhi on top. Well, now I can activate Han, put the Bodhi down, play C3PO, draw the Bodhi that was off the top of my deck. And now you're like essentially didn't spend any resources to play the 2 cards out on the same turn, and the following turn you get to attack with them and draw another card. And they have 4 toughness, so they're going to stick around. Like they're just really good. So that was kind of my thought on them. And then the other turn 1 plays that you have is activating Han, playing an Ezra. Ezra does a very similar thing where the following turn you can attack for 3. Usually take out their turn 1 ground play. If they played like a Sabine unit or something, your Ezra lives. You get to look at the top card. There's a lot of 3-drops in the deck for a reason. This is one of the reasons. Then hopefully it's a 3-drop that you can play, like a Falcon, a Tech, a DJ, a Bodhi. Play it off the top. Now you still have all the cards in your hand, so you can activate Han more on another turn. The other really good turn 1 play is, let's say your opponent plays turn 1 Green Squadron A-Wing. Well, I'm going to play a Falcon. I'm going to attack their Green Squadron A-Wing. My Falcon's going to live, and then they're going to concede.
That's a true combo. That happens.
All right.
It's not wrong.
So Troy, this is your list from Gencon. Tell me about. I mean, you acknowledged, kind of stealing his notes and his work, but tell me about how you evolved
Absolutely.
it to what did so well.
All right. So once I had Ian's homework, we began Operation Take Out the Bad Cards and Put in Good Cards. No, I'm joking.
No, that's fine. It's
Oh,
fine.
I'm joking. So actually, Ian's explanation was very helpful because the reason he put the droids in was the first thing that we evaluated. He said he put him in there to make sure that he was minimizing the card disadvantage. The first question we had was like, okay, are these cards necessary? If not, I would prefer to play other cards because they're not good on their own. And like even in the case where we have both of them, we didn't think the combo was like all that worth doing, right? You draw 1 card, that's cool. You draw 2 cards, that's cool as well. But like, is that going to win you the game? Not necessarily, right? So the first thing we evaluated was like, is the card advantage necessary? We found that, well, if you just play a higher mass of smuggle dudes, it's actually totally fine. You just dump hand, and then when you run out of hand, you just look in your resources and go, oh, cool, smuggler. Oh, cool, a Falcon, right? Ian, we talked about this during the event, and Ian said that part of the reason he wasn't playing a lot of the high smuggle cards was because he played 5 Palpatines, right? So like that makes complete sense to me. And in that environment, playing the droids is totally cool, right? It gets you the same card advantage that the smuggled units get you later on in the game. But you don't get blown up by scanning officer randomly. And I was just like, if I ever get scanning officer turn 0 after I put a card down from my hand, like I'm just so pissed. I lost a scanning officer. That's just foul.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was. I knew that there was going to be a lot of Palpatine, and because the list that won the like week prior had scanning officers in the main for that Palp list, I knew people were just going to play that exact list, no
Exactly.
changes. And I tested a lot against scanning officer, and there's 2 levels of scanning officer, right? It's they play it turn 1, and the Han player doesn't know what they're doing, and they have too many smuggled cards in.
Yeah,
They get
exactly. And
blown
then it
out.
just blanks your whole turn. That's
Right. Then there's level
horrible.
2 where the Han player knows what to do, doesn't put
Mhm.
the smuggle cards down, but the
Exactly.
Palp player still plays scanning officer on turn 1, and it doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
Then there was the next level above that, which
Oh,
was the Palp player also knows what's going on, and then they
exactly.
just wait
Just
until
hold
you
it.
either have a tech out or it's the Han
Mhm.
flip turn, and then
That
they
was
just blow
broken.
you out because there's too many like
It was so
ways for
broken.
you to have smuggle cards by then.
Yeah, and I play, villain green red was, one of my 2 major decks from, set 1. I mean, I haven't made a list that doesn't have that's mid range and doesn't have scanning officers. I mean, they're useful right now for a variety of decks. This is one of them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right.
So yeah, you're
Yeah.
talking about the list, like in terms of the cards that I put in for the droids. I mean, it's
Yeah.
exactly 6 smuggled cards. It's the Hot Shot, it's the L3, and Jetpack. Jetpack was awful. I would never play that card again. But L3 was broken, Hot Shot was broken. Those cards definitely have a home in the deck. So like that was the starting point, and then from there it was just fleshing out like ratio decisions. I can't remember what other cards. It was Cloud Rider and a New Adventure. I'm not very big on either of those, just because I feel like the defense threshold in this set is much higher than set 1. If it was set 1, I would play Cloud Rider all day. Like there were so many 3 HP units, but now like there's so many 3/5s for 3s. Like it never seems to trade up into anything useful. It's just like a very very restricted open fire, which is also not a very good card. So I didn't want to play that at all. And then a New Adventure is a cool card and it has a lot of like crazy blow up potentials, but I'm not a fan of it in general just because I don't like cards that are not good on their own and that need specific targets to become live. We talked about this before the camera went live. Coolest part of a New Adventure is in like a Palpatine context because you can use it
Mhm.
aggressively. When they yoink your dude, you just throw a New Adventure at your dude, put it back in your hand, play it again. They're pretty sick. So like in that context, it's super cool. So I might consider siding it because my sideboard was like incredibly whack. Just like very little testing went into the sideboard, so like just like random cards all over the place. So like that's a card I would consider siding for sure. So like those came out. I put in like the Cartel Turncoat. Like everyone singles that out for some reason, but I thought it made a ton of sense. And in testing, it was really good into the matchup that it's there for, which is blue green villain, because that deck is just so horrid in space. And especially if it's Kira like ECL, that card will just start beating them to death. My plan was to play it on 4 when you play like a 3 and play that out there. It's awesome to fill curve on the Han turn. Like it was doing really well in testing, but I didn't play very many blue green villain decks, so it didn't perform very well. Like I don't know if it should be in the deck. Like we had tried to build with a lot of Greedo in it, like a lot of 1-drops. It was like okay. I have to look into it a little bit more, but I think the slot makes sense, so it was pretty chill. And then like I think the only card that you weren't playing that I put in was Gamma Guards. Gamma Guards is great. That card is awesome. I would never play fewer than 2. 3 might be a bit much, but like it protects your Han turn. And like ramping it out versus Sabine is very impactful. So like that's pretty good. The list, like I said, it's only 3 days of testing, so like there's a lot of room for improvement and refinement. I don't mind the weird one-ofs all over the place, just because in terms of siding patterns and like card redundancy, it ends up working out for the ratios. It looks really ugly. It looks foul, but like there's a reason for a lot of the ratios in the deck, but it can definitely be cleaned up. Like I think Change of Heart isn't like the craziest card ever. I might just play one in the list total. What else? Like the Smuggler's Aid was awful, didn't do anything. The Lackeys should either be in the main or in the side. Like doing 1/1 is probably trolling. Like I don't know. There's like a lot of trimming I would like to do on this deck, but the bones of it I think are very good. Like L3 Hot Shot should absolutely be in the deck if you're not expecting to get Scanning Officer at every single game. Like those cards were crazy.
Yep.
Very, very strong.
And I saw is that Bamboozle in the sideboard?
Yeah,
what was
yeah.
your thought and how did it play? 'Cause we're not
My
talking
thought
about
was
one
that
yet.
I don't like it whenever Boba Fett or Han come out and swing at me. So I need to put those guys sideways. Like that was the literal only reason it's in the deck. Any other application's very fringe. You can do things like you can knock off experience tokens off of a Tarkin or Array unit. You can punish people for like it like punishes Darksaber on Sabine. Like you're always trying to blow out the noob swords, so that card is absolutely worth playing, but kind of situational. There were a lot of times it was just dead, and like I just cast it for 2 as like a really terrible, like no good to me dead type thing, and I was like, well, it's like good enough, I guess. But like when you get to use its -1 ability, you're like, whoa, this is broken. Like I can just play like 9 resources worth of cards on this turn. I'm just gonna dump my whole hand and blow this guy out of the water.
I would expect to see an uptick in Darksabers in Sabine decks in the near future here.
I hate that card.
Just because of
Freaking-
the mirrors.
yeah.
I mean, I can tell you that was the tweak I made after watching the excellent video you did with
Sword.
Ryan. But yeah. All right. So this was the day 3 one that you ran, and I think actually, for what it's worth, Kira picked up because Wu won day 2.
Absolutely.
With Kira. So there's a lot more Kira on day 3. I don't know. Did you notice that, Ian?
I didn't play against it, but I did notice that was like there was more Kira decks. I was still expecting a lot of Sabine and Palp Yellow, which is pretty much what I played against. So the going into day 3 after not doing well the first 2 days with my original list, and after talking with Troy and giving me some insights, which is like one of my favorite things about deck building and card games in general, is like you're never going to be the sole player who like figures out everything. So like talking with other really good players, and just they're going to think of things that you don't think of. So that was super helpful. And I was actually talking with one of the Bothan Network testing partners that I have, Frank Myers, who's a great guy. And we were out to dinner and like having some drinks and food, and Frank just like leans over. He goes, "Hear me out. What if you put the Rebel package in? Keep the droids, play the Rebel package. 'Cause he's, big blonde Sabine guy. He is the blonde Sabine guy. So, he's always big on the Rebel package. And he's like, what if you just go faster than them? And I was like, that's kind of how my original set 1 deck was kind of laid out. Like I played Fleet Lieutenants and Wing Leaders in that deck because you didn't really have any other options, right? Like the hero cards were just all rebels. That's all you had. So I was like, all right, let's figure it out. I put in the hotshot blasters because there's no scanning officers in the room, and Troy said they overperformed for him. I thought giving R2 and C3PO a gun was the coolest thing that you could do in this game. So
no, they can get they can get a lightsaber too as a turret player.
That is true.
Keep going.
But a gun. So yeah, the hotshot blasters made it, and the whole version of this was just less all in on the tech DJ combo, more all in on like an aggro game plan. And if you can combo someone and it doesn't like mess you up in terms of like weird card interactions or like mana problems, then you can go for it. And it did really well. One of the other things too that I added to the deck was sneak attack, and the reason for that is because of having Fleet Lieutenant being able to just have 5 damage out of nowhere because it can target itself is a really strong play. And if you're playing sneak attack, then it actually makes the new adventures better because now you can save the unit that you just sneak attacked. And that was shout out to Jeremiah from the Bothan Network. That was his idea with the new adventures. New adventure in my original list was just a nod to the Palpatine matchup, and I had cut them, put Grogu's into the main for a while, and I decided that I wanted to have the new adventures back after talking to Jeremiah, and they were absolutely phenomenal all day because you have wing leaders and fleet lieutenants, and you have just so much more like enters the battlefield when played kind of things that are happening. Besides now, like before, you kind of just had Bodhi and Cantina Bouncer. It also can obviously like reset damage on a unit. To make a Falcon 3-mana Falcon attack again. But with sneak attack, it was just insane. Like I think literally in my first game of the day, I had 4 resources. I had an Ezra out, I sneak attacked Fleet Lieutenant, attacked for 5, and then new adventured it, attacked with a wing leader for 4 damage using the Fleet Lieutenant +2 again. And now the Fleet Lieutenant stays on the board. They're never going to kill it when you sneak attack it because they know it's going to die at the end of the turn. So like you can't really get blown out. So it was really good all day. The hot shot blasters were really good all day. The rogue operatives were surprisingly really good. I really liked the ability to attack for 4 and have something where you could put a surprise strike onto a unit that allowed you to kill Boba unit, or sorry, Boba leader, because the 7 health threshold's kind of tough for your deck because most of your early units have 3 power. So yeah, it was really good. I ended up going 5-0. Lost to the inevitable winner of that day. I think his name's Benjamin, who was playing Yellow Boba. We had insane
Toro Boba.
games.
Yep.
Yeah, the Toro Boba deck. We had insane games. They are actually recorded. Code Amarin has the recording somewhere. I'm sure they'll get posted eventually. But I definitely recommend watching that because it is a nail biter. Both of the games, we had a non-verbal agreement that neither of us were going to trade into each other's units. And so we just both went face, and on the pivotal like turn where we both at like 20 plus damage, we both have like 4 units out. I started the initiative both games, and all I needed to do was draw like a Fleet Lieutenant, a Cunning, a Surprise Strike, a Hotshot Blaster. In both games, he asked me, "Do you have it?" And both times, I have to say, "No, I do not," and I lost.
No, I was on table 1, day 2, in a Sabine mirror, and it came down to a Rebel Assault. So
Yeah, yeah.
That's kind of the ways that you know.
No, I can't even be
have it
mad at
right.
myself.
This is how it
I
is.
put myself in a position to win, and sometimes you just don't get there.
No, and you
It
got
was
to
my
play,
first-
and you got to play to your outs. I mean, that's a poker.
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
I mean, you play to the card that wins, and you draw it or you don't. But anybody who says luck doesn't play a part is
Oh no,
full
yeah.
of it or lying.
That's a hard game.
Yeah.
All right, just play with a deck that has the card Cunning in it, and then see what
Mhm.
happens when you don't draw Cunning, and see what happens when you draw 1 or even 2 copies. Like the power level of the deck just starts increasing every time you draw another Cunning. So
Yeah, I had a testing game against somebody who drew all 3 Cunnings, and they barely beat me. And then they're, oh, it's not that bad. I'm like, well, I mean, how do you think that would have went?
yeah.
Okay, so this list evolved. I mean, this has a high Rebel package. I mean, you're talking about sneak attack and saving it. That's also relevant, probably more to Boba players, but with McClunky, so
Sure, yeah.
I haven't seen, that yet too. But okay, so you guys agree this is a tempo deck?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so this is something that's been asked in comments, but I think that since you're the first mono yellow masterclass of set 2, we're gonna spend some time here. I mean, when you're talking about a CCG or a competitive or collectible card game, I mean, what is tempo? When people hear that words, what are they talking about? Why is this a tempo deck?
Yeah, so for me, tempo is all about the pace of the game and your role in manipulating the pace. So for a double yellow deck, you have a lot of cards like Cunning that do a lot of things in one action. And by doing things in one action, you're kind of breaking the standard rules of the game, right? Where it's I do one thing, you do one thing. So when you get to do multiple things at once, you're now changing the pace of play, which is increasing the tempo. You're putting your game plan forward multiple steps without letting your opponent do any steps, and sometimes setting them back a step. So for example, any of the bounce spells like Cantina Bouncer, really good tempo play. Like they spend 5 mana on a Poe. It's a 6/6. It doesn't do anything. It has to untap and attack to actually do something. You play a Cantina Bouncer. That goes back to their hand. Now you have a 3/5. You've developed your board and you've undeveloped their board.
And now they have to use another action to get their Poe back out and the resources.
Well, and all their resources again.
Right.
So you've essentially jailed that card for an entire turn, which may as well be the rest of the game in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
So, bounce is a tempo gain. I mean, exhaust can be a tempo gain.
Yeah, especially
Well,
if you're like in a racing scenario, like
yeah.
cunning, tapping 2 things and giving +4 just completely changes the dynamics of a race.
Mhm.
It's like the key way that this deck and any other cunning deck beats the Sabine decks.
Yeah. So there's tempo in terms of actions, and then there's also tempo in terms of turns, how long the game goes, when you're expecting to kill them. If it's my whole goal with this deck is to kind of build up a winning board state going into my leader turn, and then after my leader turn allows me to play like more resources than I should, my board will produce more damage than theirs. And in the off chance that their board is still there, I'm trying to like activate cunning and make it so that their board doesn't do anything or disrupt them with Cantina Bouncer, right? So if they're threatening 3 damage per turn and I'm threatening, 12 to 15 damage per turn, well, then the game's going to end a lot quicker on my side than theirs, right? So it doesn't matter that eventually they'll blow me out with some kind of crazy, high costed unit if they can't get to that, right? Or if, like you said, if they play out a card like Poe, right? If you put it back in their hand and it takes them 2 turns for that Poe to accomplish anything, where they're so behind on tempo that by the time the Poe accomplishes anything, they either can't ever win the race, right? Post swings for 8, that's a lot of damage. But if they only have like 4 damage on your base when they're swinging for 8, the 8 doesn't matter, right? You don't have to win the game by 20 HP, you just have to win the game by 1 HP. So that's what is meant by tempo, is just making sure that you're in control of the pace of the game. That makes complete sense.
Yep. And we highlighted, I think, in Ian's answer, cunning and Cantina Bouncer. Ezra, we talked as a card that generates plus tempo for this deck, and I mean, why?
Yeah, so Ezra is one of my favorite cards in this game. I have a soft spot for the show Rebels. I love Ezra as a character, so it's great that his character is like I think one of the best 3-drops in the game, specifically only in this deck, and that's because you can play it on turn 1. One of the other ways that you can leverage tempo is by playing things above curve. So normally you can't play Ezra until turn 2, which means you can't attack with him and get his
Right.
trigger until turn 3. So by activating Han, playing Ezra on turn 1, you're now getting that attack trigger a whole turn sooner. Plus, you have a body that shouldn't be there yet, right? Like the game is specifically designed so that 2-drop units have XYZ stats, right? Most of them don't have 4 health outside of like the droids and like some other things, but then they don't have a lot of attack.
Right. And like you have like Battlefield Marine is pretty much the strongest pure stat drop at a 3/3. I mean,
Right. So against decks that like to play a turn 1 ground play, and I get to play this turn 1 Ezra, it's really, really good. And one of the other things that's awesome about this deck is actually utilizing the Han action to your advantage on turn 1. So for example, against Sabine, a lot of times they'll have a decision that they want to make. Do I want to go space? Do I want to go ground? And they usually want to dodge what you're doing. But if you have the Ezra Bridger in your hand and you have the Millennium Falcon in your hand, you have 2 things that both answer those things, and you can force them to make their decision first because you have the free action of activating Han, which you need to do anyways because you have to get to 3 mana.
yeah, and one thing that makes this deck tough is that, I mean, I think that is the general game plan for Sabine is to, try to lane dodge, get your damage in, but at the same time, now given your combo, you also have to be prepared to murder attack, or lose too. So it makes some tough decisions.
Yep. And usually the way I look at it is if the Ezra can attack once and you get a card, it's done more than enough. If it ever trades with something and lives, or attacks into something and lives, it's done more than enough. Sometimes if you see a card on top, you don't want to see it and you discard it, it's done more than enough. Like it's done its job. I usually end up resourcing it late, but it's one of my favorite turn 1 plays for sure.
Yeah, Ezra's a very interesting tempo discussion, especially as compared to like the other 3-drops. So like Ian said, the fact that you get usually 2 turns of value out of Ezra is way and above what the card was intended for. So that's up in tempo. But later on in the game, right, the fact that it has to untap and then swing to do anything, and then even when that's being accomplished, all it does is cycle a card or maybe hit something crazy off the top, becomes much worse and even kind of down tempo after your Han turn. Compare that to something like Bodhi Rook, right? Bodhi Rook accomplishes something immediately on play. It doesn't have to untap. So in those kind of 5, 6, 7 resource situations, it's so much better than Ezra and so much faster and more immediate value than Ezra. Whereas Ezra has better stats and can hit over something and generate you more tempo in the early game after turns, 4 or 5. Like this thing, I would never play it, unless I had to, like after those turns. You would rather always be Falcon or Bodhi because those are cards that are getting something now, and doing something much more impactful.
Yep, and Change of Heart, I put as another tempo card. I mean, it's an obvious finisher, right? It's trying to come in and end a game, by taking a unit that they can't address in some way.
Yeah, like the best option is Fire Spray, right? They play all their resources for Fire Spray, right? If you just take that immediately, what did they do? They paid 6 resources to hand you 5 damage, right? Now you haven't dealt with the Fire Spray, so if you can't deal with it in 2 turns, right, you've paid 6 resources to not accomplish very much. But if you can kind of capitalize on that damage swing, which usually you can because the games are pretty advanced by that stage, it's doing everything you want for it. So it's all about putting your opponent behind long enough for you to end the game or for you to get into a position that's very winning. That's what tempo is.
Right. And I mean, that's why, things like, Waylay, Change of Heart, I mean, it solves your problem for a time.
Exactly.
The opponent could have eventually used that card again. Like, I think that was a great discussion. Hopefully that clears things
And
up.
it's just a matter of, will they ever get a chance to play this card again? If it matters, right? If you waylay a K2, right, like it's going to be 2 turns until that K2 accomplishes anything. So, and they'll have to spend all their mana to play that, So, is it really going to do anything for them? It may as well be removing it from the game entirely.
Right, which is why I think Sabine should be running 3 timelies, though that was not the case. Certainly every deck there. All right, so Han Solo, the leader. I mean, we rated him very high, even though that we felt that Hero Yellow was not great by itself, set 1.
Come on.
It's got
Hero Yellow is the best color, dude.
Dude, it didn't even have Baby Yoda. There's trash color on set 1. You know it.
No, I liked it. I liked it, dude.
it's
okay.
It's got some absolutely great cards. I mean, Millennium Falcon will be played as a 3-0
Forever.
in yellow decks until it rotates.
Yeah. I mean, I was always a Yellow Cunning or a Yellow Hero fan, so, but I understand the hate that it gets.
Yeah, well, there's just not bombs, right? But it's not really, supposed to be. But Han Solo, the leader, I mean, what I was going to say is we rated him very high despite that, right? Because as a leader, he does, I think his action is strong. I mean, his body's, not terrible, but his on attack is good. Let's talk about how this deck plays Han. First off, when are you using his leader side, before you deploy?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it depends. Troy, me and Troy might actually have different opinions on this. So I will always activate him turn 1 unless I have something specific that I want to do instead. Like if I'm playing Sparks main, I have initiative, and I'm playing a deck that relies on playing a 1-drop on turn 1, or sorry, a 2-drop on turn 1. Then I'll think about maybe not activating Han, sparking them, trying to like high roll and get their 2-drop, and hope that they don't have a second one.
And what decks are those?
So that's like mostly Sabine. Sometimes against Boba Yellow, I like doing that as well. Which kind of sounds like unintuitive because you want to like play to the board in those matchups. But I found that like a lot of times, especially if they don't know you're playing the Spark of Rebellion, so it's like really good in game 1. You can kind of catch them off guard, especially like Boba Yellow likes to only keep 1 2-drop. They don't play a lot of 2-drops in the first place. So like if you can get their turn 1 play, that you set them back a lot. So I like doing certain things like that. Sometimes I'll play like a naked C3PO and just name 3.
And then hit.
Yeah, always hit. Come on.
Easy.
But yeah, so I'll activate Han on turn 1 in all other cases. Sometimes you mulligan into a hand that doesn't allow you to do that, but there's a lot of 3-drops in the deck for a reason. And then I rarely will use his ability until the flip turn unless I've lost the board already. A good example of that is like if I'm playing against Sabine deck and they're flooding the board with a lot of like Sabine Yellow, for example, where they play a lot of one drops. They're way more low to the ground, kind of try to swarm you. I'll be more likely to try to play out more things from my hands and activate Han. But other than that, I try to avoid using his ability frequently in the beginning turns unless I have a card advantage engine online that's giving me free cards to use.
All right. How does that differ if you do have a different opinion, Troy?
Oh, I'm like kind of a psycho. I activate this guy whenever I feel like it does anything. Turn one, yes, very frequently. The only time I wouldn't is so I disagree on the Spark aggressive decks a little bit because it doesn't allow you to develop any tempo of your own, and you run the risk of them just randomly having 2 1-drops, and then you like kind of lose the game on the spot. So I don't like sparking aggressive decks. I will spark ramp decks though sometimes if I'm feeling like my next follow-up plays are pretty good. Or if it helps me decide between like playing out a Bodhi or an Ezra on 3, taking their resupply or laser tech feels pretty good.
Yeah, I like doing that to Kira or blue green. There's other decks to Kira too.
So that's always decent, but I would almost always rather deploy a unit. I do like not ramping against cunning mirrors, but that's just because I think Crafty Smuggler in those matchups is very good. Your 3/4s, they don't hit over very much in the Crafty Smuggler type matchup decks. Like if they play out a Greedo, you run the risk of, if you try to hit over the Greedo, them just hitting a spell and then you've lost your unit that you paid -1 for. That's not good. Trying to trade into a Crafty is just never happening. So I like Crafty more because I think that unit sticks around and typically trades up and doesn't require me to go -1. It's also good against, like, obviously kill spell turbo decks, right? If you ever play against a vigilance decks, I don't want to just ramp out an Ezra and let them kill it. That sounds awful. So I would prefer to start with just a Crafty. Starting with Falcon against those decks is totally chill because you always get something for the card. If they power it, I could care less. I already got something out of the card. So like turn one, usually probably 80 to 90% of the times I'm slamming it, but there are matchup specific considerations to where you would prefer and look for like different low drops. Like I'm like looking actively for Crafty Smuggler against Cunning. And like I want to play more Crafty Smuggler in my list just because that card is very good against those matchups. So that's
and we have new and improved Crafty Smuggler L3
exactly right
available too.
So but now I can play 6 of them if I want to, which I really don't, but maybe 4 or 5.
And there will be capture decks that catch on more.
Well, one of these days you would assume so. Right. So like that's on the turn 0. In terms of ramping out a 4, I don't do that very often, but like ramping out a Kira against the kind of slower decks is very impactful just because her body is difficult to get off the board, and you can hostage their powerful card. You can like hostage an ECL target is crazy. Hostage, like their power cards. That's always very good. Ramping out Gamorrean guards is something that happens frequently. Like that is pretty crazy because you can protect your damage, and playing a 4/4 on 3 is like above rate, so it's pretty impactful on there. So I like ramping up Gamorrean guards quite a bit. So like I just be activating this guy all the time. He's really good.
All right, so let's talk about a good Han flip turn. So I mean, Han has the ability of making it so he can deploy, right? Because if you are at 5, you use Han's ability, now you're at 6, you can deploy, and then you go from there. But to you, how are you trying to set up a good turn, whatever the Han flip turn is? Whoever wants to
I
start.
mean, it's always going to depend on the cards that you have available to you at that point, but the kind of goal that I have in mind is that I want to present myself with multiple options so that depending on what my opponent does, I can kind of pivot. So a good example of this is I have a DJ in my resources. I'm not doing the tech DJ, but I'm thinking about maybe I'll DJ on 7. If I have like a Han unit out, you get to play this like kind of dancing game because you're going to get to 7 resources against certain decks. Like they can't really interact with your leader that well, or they have the board's pretty clear. So you activate Han, put Han out, attack. Now you have 7 resources, and depending on if they've played all of their stuff out, if they haven't played all their stuff out, you can either steal their resource with DJ. Now they're down a resource. Maybe they can't use their resources fully. Maybe they played 1 card. They have like 3 open resources left, and you know that they're trying to use a 3-drop that turn because maybe you saw their hand previously from like a discard spell, and you're able to, you know, steal that resource and defeat it later. Other times they're gonna like play out a big thing on 5, like maybe Gideon or something, or a Poe, and then you get to just play Han unit and completely take it out. The other option that I like as well is putting, especially if you're already in the point where you're trying to race them, Han leader plus cunning plus Millennium Falcon is 11 damage, and that's without having anything else on the board before the turn started. So that's like such a huge damage swing, and especially with cunning being able to tap 2 things down as well, like the race is just going to swing in your favor.
What are you looking to do on your Han turn?
Yeah, so I think for me, so I played a lot of Han Green set 1 just because it was like the coolest deck, most fun deck, and in that deck you almost were always trying to go 5 to 7 just because I mean there wasn't really a whole lot else worth doing. Like your low resource plays were like just bad, so that was like that's why it was a kind of a gimmicky deck. This one is definitely not that. I find myself almost never trying to just blast 7 resources. It's a very all-in play. Against certain decks, yes, you can get away with it because you know that they can't interact with your Han leader, but like those decks aren't very good. So against the better decks, like Sabine can always interact with your Han play by just ECLing Poe over your guy. Like that's a huge blowout.
Or even worse,
Boba Fett has...
you're trying to do Wrecker if you can. You know, those,
Yeah.
it's usually, you know,
Well, no, it's on 5, right?
Right.
So,
yeah.
yeah, but anyway, like Boba Fett has 5 million ways to put your guy down. Like Kira has disruption, so like very, very difficult to try to greed and go 5 to 7. I'm almost always trying to just play out like 4-3 or like 3-2, you know, something like 3-2-2. It's trying to fill curve and accomplish as much as you can before you flip your leader. To make sure that that play sticks, because like I don't want to lose 4 free damage. I don't want to lose this powerful like resource generating on attack ability. So I'll almost always have to start with something that kind of frees up my line or helps me pick what I'm gonna do. So like I'm very liable to spend resources at the beginning of the turn. So like maybe like I'll swing with my board first to try to like make sure my board doesn't get traded off. But very often, like the first thing that's going to happen when I start trying to make a Han play is I'll play something for 4. So it's either like cunning to make sure that they can't surprise strike my leader on entry, tap their guys down, buff my guy, hit them with it, try to get something out of their hand because like they're not just going to let me hit them for 7 with Falcon in space, right? Something's probably going to happen to interrupt that play. All right, cool. Now my Han can resolve. I can put a blaster on him. I can do something else. That's always something worth doing. So usually it's start with a 4. Cunning, you can start with a Gamma Guard just to insulate your board. Start with a Kira, check their hand. Start with a Spark. There's like very many ways that you can start kind of clearing the way for your Han to resolve, just to get that extra resource into rotation. So like going 4-3 is very good. A Spark is like going 5-2 is really awesome because it's like Cantina Bouncer plus either Spark or Surprise Strike. You're always happy about that. The fact that a 3 can come from your resources in the hot shot is always good. Playing out a Falcon at the end of your turn always feels super powerful because you're going to get to untap and pop. You know, you get to cheat the tax there. Like those are all of the like good outcomes. And then the kind of contingency plans are like, oh gosh, something weird happened, or I can't stop them from tapping my guy down. I'm just going to force the answer and then smuggle out a Falcon for 6. That's a pretty acceptable line. Starting with Waylay and then playing Tech, sticking Tech at the very end is like another good line. There's all sorts of like combinations of cards, but I would advise anyone that's like starting this deck, don't just try to go 5 to 7 every single time. Look for the opportunity to try to play more cards and accomplish more with your resource cheat.
Yeah, and I think it's important as a going against this deck to have actions to do too, to kind of make the Han player commit to things. You know, right? Because if you can, you know, the nightmare scenario for Han is he gets pillaged right in the middle of the flip turn.
Yeah, that feels awful.
But I mean, you got to have some cards.
Yeah, against certain decks, even if you're not planning to go right to 7, you should just activate your leader ability first to make sure that you can guarantee it.
Right. Okay. And it's important to be ahead at the end of the Han flip turn.
Yeah, I mean that's the goal, is that you're either ahead on board presence and damage on base, or by resource.
Mhm.
You know, by stealing their resource and destroying it, and then
Absolutely.
make them go back down to 5, and you go up to 8, or so you would be at 7. Sorry.
All right. Let's talk about cunning. I mean, it's a core card in the deck. I mean, everybody I think knows like what its abilities are, at this
Yeah.
point. But are you just casting this every time you have 4 mana on the card in your hand, or what's your thought pattern?
Absolutely not.
Yeah. So
I disagree.
Ooh, cutting. Boom.
Right. so I mean, there people playing mono yellow for the first time are kind of like that sometimes.
For sure. They're just like, whoa, I get to do all this. That's crazy. Boom. And then like the guy gets waylaid and they're like, oh.
So give me the like cunning 401 type answers as to the thought processes is when it's the best time to use.
I mean, I want to make me sound smart and say, oh, this card's really hard to play with, and it's never clear what you should really do, and you have to be really skilled with the deck to do it. But 80% of the time, you're casting this card, you're tapping 2 things, and you're giving something +4, and you're just going to kill them. That's the way that I play the card. I don't know if Troy agrees with that, but pretty much 80% of the time, that's what I'm doing.
Well, if they have one thing and it costs less than 4 or has 4 than less power,
Yeah, you might as well bounce it. Yeah.
You might want to bounce it. But
Dealing with their thing and then also +4ing is like almost always what I'm doing. I rarely use the discard, but that's probably because I have not been playing the control decks recently, so I haven't really had a need to do that. But I don't really like playing it on 4 unless there's a really good reason to.
Yeah,
like
you wanna
bouncing
develop
a
your
Sentinel or bouncing like a K2, but like usually they're not playing that right away, and then you don't have enough actions to like delay playing the cunning on turn 4 or on the 4 resource turn, so you can't really get as much value out of it.
And I was talking to some, I think with both Han and Boba, which are the 2 popular mono decks. Anytime you can get them to play cunning before their leader deploy, that's kind of a win for the opponent, right? Because they probably were on the back foot that they felt they had to do that.
Yeah.
Well, the only exception is when they play the Gamma guards on 4. Then this punishes them. It puts it back in their hand. Hits for 4.
Yeah, good. I will say against specifically ECL Sabine, I will use cunning on 4 to bounce whatever is in play usually and +4 something to try to bait them into using their ECL with like a K2 and trade in my unit because they think that that's a really good play for them, and it never is, because now they're not ECLing Poe or Wrecker, and I usually just win that game.
And we'll, if you check out my deck tech on Sabine, I mean, the plan is to ECL Wrecker. I mean, you can
ideally,
you can sometimes, now your deck is one where Poe is oftentimes what actually gets done, but,
right. You have to, otherwise you die.
You don't, you lose your opportunity to, push a lot of overwhelm damage doing anything else. What do you think as far as cunning, Troy? I mean, are you using the other?
Oh, it's absolutely God card. But yeah, you try to hold it for a punish a lot of the time. You want them to have to answer your board, spend all their resources, and then you do something heinous to them. The best ability is the bounce one. That's the most like mana positive ability. You're essentially getting a +4 for 1 resource. That's crazy. The discard from hand, that's really good against the like blue-green villain decks because they have to resource for a very long time. So you will get them to a game state where after their resource, they'll have 1 card in hand, right? Because they just have to play so much to keep up with you. So at that point, you'll go like discard +4 and then hit them. But yeah, almost always trying to hit them with +4. Forces answers. No one just wants to get domed for 4. So you can
plus
use
whatever
it
the unit has
answers,
too.
And hard control when that starts creeping up in the meta too. I mean, that
one of these days
that mode will, relates to when they don't actually have units out. All right, tech, not a rebel, but
not a rebel.
Basically, gives you a whole second hand to play with in your resource.
Yeah. Outside of cunning, I think this is the best card in the deck by a large margin. I think that people think of this card as like, oh, it's really only useful against control or even soft control. I disagree a lot. I play this card in pretty much every matchup. I've played it against Sabine profitably before, even when I don't have Tech DJ. Like, obviously the Tech DJ combo is really good, but this card has Pseudo Sentinel. It basically is a must kill for your opponent. If not, they're going to get blown out in some way. I make a lot of resource decisions knowing that I have tech, knowing that, this surprise strike is going to win me the game on the 8 resource turn when I smuggle out a tech and smuggle out a surprise strike.
Oh, so Ian, tech can bring events out of your resource row too, not just units.
It's true.
So read the card. I've had people be surprised by that. I mean, it is literally anything that's in your discard pile. And it smuggled by itself creates card advantage. I think you were mentioning that before, Trey.
Yeah, it's great.
So,
Free.
right, the second part of smuggle is the card gets replaced from the top of your deck.
Yeah. The amount of times too that this is like kind of a higher technical play too that I'll do is, let's say like at the end of this is like after the Han flip turn or something, where tech gets like way more in value because you have more resources. I played something for 4. I have 3 resources left. I haven't activated Han yet, because he got killed at some point. Now he's back in the leader zone. If I have a tech in hand, like I drew it for turn, and I didn't resource it for some reason, like I resourced another smuggle card or something, it's almost always better to activate Han, as long as you have the amount of actions available, is to activate Han, put this into your resources, and smuggle it out instead of playing it from hands for 3. And
Is
the
that because
reason
you get
is,
another like smuggle card? Okay.
yeah, you get another smuggle cards, and a lot of times like your resources are going to be filled with things that you don't really care about, like a random Ezra or a
Ezra,
random
yeah.
droid, or something that like you can't play from your resources and have a impact immediately with tech, and so you can often like find a really good card that way. I've also, when I try to do the tech DJ combo, I try to not play tech naked as a 3-drop. I try to smuggle him instead, especially if you don't actually have the DJ yet. But this could still be a viable play because it also just gets you another chance to look for a DJ.
And did either of you ever bluff, the combo by playing out a tech?
All the time.
Yep. All right, so the second half of it is DJ. I mean, so if you have tech out, he goes for 5 essentially, and you can play him for 7. Any sense of how often you're doing? Well, first off, are you playing out DJ as a unit without smuggling much?
Sometimes you have to.
Sometimes you have to. It really depends on the matchup. I think against Palp Yellow, it's like really rare for me now. Before, when people really didn't know what was going on, it was a lot better. But now that the deck is catching on and people have played against it and they feel the blowout when it happens, the DJ combo isn't as effective, and DJing for 7 isn't usually as good because they will still have enough to play a fire spray most of the time. So it's usually not good enough. So that's like one matchup where I really won't try to do it. Against Sabine, it can be good sometimes. If you
have to play into it pretty hard.
Yeah, you also kind of need a cunning to follow it up, or else it's never gonna actually work out. But one of the hardest things for the Sabine deck, or for the Han deck to beat Sabine, is when they have the ECL wrecker. And if you can delay them a turn or 2 on having that ability, I found it to be good enough. But
it also takes them off of ECL Poe, right? You can do it on 4.
Yeah.
Now, are you doing it for 5 with tech and then for 7 as well later in the game?
Sometimes, but pretty infrequently. I think the coolest thing about DJ is knowing when the timing is. So the later you do it, and I'm talking just between the difference of doing it on 3 resources as compared to 4 or 5, the later you do it, the more card economy it produces because you're smuggling it. But you can go for like an early DJ, right? So you can go play out tech for 3 from hand, right? You didn't get the smuggle for +1. That's not ideal, but then that lets you, if you have a tech in your resources, or a DJ rather, if you have DJ in your resources on the 4 resource turn, you just activate Han, put a card down, and then attempt to scam them on 4 resources, which is a play that some people, like a lot of people, don't expect, and also their answers are much more limited. They can't, like, Syndicate Lackeys no longer clears it, so it's a play that you can consider going for. It's matchup dependent. It's not always the correct play, but sometimes you can catch them unaware. And like if they tap out for just anything that doesn't interact that combo, then they've lost the game. And like they're really far behind after that.
And do remember to destroy their resource.
Of course.
I've seen Han players fail to do that, and then DJ dies. I'm like, oh. All right. So my 2 Falcons. You know,
I love these.
I think the first one, I mean, it comes in ready. I mean, it has the synergy with Han's resource.
Fire spray on 3. This thing's crazy,
Mini spray.
honestly.
All right, so what about the newcomer, the second Falcon? What matchups is that important?
I think that is important in probably every matchup outside maybe Sabine, but sometimes it could be good against Sabine. I will almost always resource the first copy, and then if I draw the second copy, I'll think about it. If like the ambush from hand is ever worth it. Sometimes it's not. But this card is kind of protection in the Han turn, where if your Han dies after you activated and deployed him, but he doesn't get to attack and get you to 7 mana, it's like the best insurance play that turn. It's also just sometimes like a pivot, right? So the Han deck is really good, especially if you're doing tech DJ shenanigans, to have a lot of ground presence. And if you can flip the switch the moment that the opponent gets control, regains control of the ground, and switch and put like a 5-power ship into space, a lot of times they're not prepared to do that, and you've already done like 20 damage to their base.
Right. All right, so let's kind of go through the matchups here. I mean, you guys both did well into the field. What's the game plan into Sabine?
Punning.
Well, it's also just swing over their 2-drop.
Yeah. Play a good 3-drop on turn 1, whether it's on the ground or in space after they've played an A-wing. Kill it the following turn or that turn if you played the Falcon. And then I essentially, against Green Sabine, I will rarely try to trade into minions afterward. I'll just go face every time.
Yeah, you can outrace them. If you see a single cunning, it's very difficult for them to race you.
Yeah,
we talked
and
about
that's
that later.
specifically with ECL,
And
because
what-
ECL having 5 less health is like actually super relevant when you can get +4 and +3 at whim.
Like they can die on your leader turn pretty easily.
And
Yeah.
what are you sideboarding for Sabine? Sabine is what we're talking about.
I am a big fan of Grogu. I think that card is cracked in a lot of decks, against a lot of decks, specifically Sabine and against Boba. Some people aren't a big fan. A lot of people like Leia. I would argue that Leia is a weaker Grogu, but that's because Grogu can play, it can do the effect for multiple turns, especially if you play him on turn 1. Like, he's a great turn 1 play.
All right, any sideboard advice for Sabine, Troy?
I haven't tested Grogu very much. I like him. I want to play him just because it's Grogu. But I was playing all sorts of horrible cards. Like I played Smuggler's Aid. That card I don't think is very good. The heal is not relevant. I just thought, well, it heals you out of range of burn, but like you're actually just trying to kill them, and like their big plays are impactful enough to where that's never winning you the game. So like my good sideboard against them was like Bamboozle was really good. It gives you an option that beats the Noob Sword, which is the one card you care about beating on 4 almost every single time. So that card's good. Yeah, Grogu I can definitely see. But your main deck, I mean, you just natively have a pretty good matchup against Sabine. You don't need to side deck too much. It's mostly just, okay, can I find a way to force their ECL early so that my leader stays safe? Or like, can I interrupt their Poe?
Or you could look
That's
at
like the big swing.
you could look
It's
at
an opportunity to win. If they see Noob Sword plus Poe, it's kind of losing, but that's a lot to ask.
Well, I think kind of the main deck of every deck, gives a fair amount of, credence.
Yeah, you have to
idea
respect that.
to
Otherwise
that
just
you
get
get
all
the
over it.
aggro. So I mean, it is one there. What about Hero Blue Red? This could be Turret. This could be Swamp Han. This can be Ray. What's your game plan?
Yeah, so for those decks, I think that Hand Hate is really good. So if you're not playing Sparks in the side, or you don't have all 3 of them in the main deck, I would definitely side those in. Being able to take out things like Force Throw or Pillage is really impactful, or like a key Luke can be all really, really beneficial. You could also, so like my original list from Baltimore had Fell the Dragons in the sideboard. Those were primarily for Fire Spray. That was before the existence of this new Blue Han 2 deck. And I would probably have those in the sideboard again, and probably bring them in against that deck as well.
Yeah, no, they have actual Great Dragons.
Yeah.
Well, against that deck, you're just trying to keep all of your bounce tempo cards. That deck, it's a 1 card per turn deck. So when you put that 1 card per turn back in their hand, they're not doing anything. They've time walked themselves. Like they play so many cards that just don't do anything on entry as well. Like it's pretty tough, I think, for them. Like their deck is worse into Boba just because Boba plays more disruption than this deck, but you still have the same like core cards that really mess with their game plan. Han2 is a little tougher because like they play out an actual good unit like K2 on 3, and like you're not really just trying to waylay and tap out on 3. That it's not very good at all, but I don't think it's an unfavored matchup either. Like you have enough ways to just make sure that they're not accomplishing anything. Like their early game is just rather weak. Like if they stick a Luke, it could be losing, but you have ways to get it out of their hand.
All right, what about Boba Yellow?
So Boba Yellow, I think really everything depends on the version of the deck that you're playing. I've found that the Rebel version is really good at racing it, but obviously you need to draw your pump spells. Those are important. It's the cunning mirrors. Like I would say, even against the actual mirror, playing Han Yellow against Han Yellow, it can be kind of skill testing. I would say it's probably like 50% who draws more cunnings, and then 50% who can play the cunnings better, or play like their flip turn better, because the Boba flip turn is also really important for them. And so I would definitely say, like, sideboard wise for Boba, I definitely want the Fell the Dragons. I think Grogu's really good against them. But other than that, you just kind of have to play like 100% optimally, unfortunately, because there's really not a lot of room for error, because they'll punish you like pretty much every time. If you play a cunning first, they get to cunning back and tap the thing that you buffed. So like, it's a really annoying matchup, to be honest.
Yeah, I actually think that Boba is not a good matchup for Han. You wouldn't pick this deck expecting to play a lot of Boba Fett. It's kind of weird, right? You kind of expect Boba Fett to be the best deck in the format, so why would you pick Han, right? The reason you pick it is mostly because of its edge against the blue-green villain decks, which Boba really can't seem to beat. It's really strange.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That's like the consideration. So Boba Fett is a weird matchup, but it is incredibly like skill testing. I think I was lucky at Gencon that most Boba Fett players that I played did not seem to know how to play the matchup. They got too preoccupied with trading board, and the game went too long. And eventually, I stuck a tech or I stuck a Han unit, and like from there, they just could never catch back up. But really, what you're supposed to do on the other side is like just disrupt them enough to where you can win the race, and then your deck just inherently has more like body generating disruption plus fire spray that you should win that race more often than not. It's pretty tough.
Their leader also comes out the same turn and has one extra health.
It has more stats and it kills you with surprise strike and lives. So like,
and
it's tough.
I think they might have been kind of going at a Han Green approach into Han Yellow, which is a mistake.
Right. So I think it's a weird matchup. In terms of what you can play to make that matchup better, it depends on your opponent, right? If they're playing the kind of too long game, the kind of trade over your board a lot, the mid-range quality units become much better. That's why I was playing Tobias. I thought, okay, this is really good to play in front of Gamorrean guards. It doesn't die to like 4-lom. This has good stats, it has good text. So like that card could come up in the tournament. It was like pretty decent when I played it, but I think if my opponents were just more aggressive, it would have just ended up back in my hand and like not done anything. So I have to think a little bit more about what to play. Like Bamboozle's good. Bamboozle's randomly like the only good card in my side deck, honestly.
Yep, no, they might be trying to sneak an armor. What about Han Yellow mirrors? I mean, you ran into one, Ian, you said.
Yeah, I ran into it twice at Gen Con, and we had some good games. Ended up winning both of them, but it kind of is a toxic mirror match because of the resource destruction. Can be really annoying. A lot of times it's who ends up having initiative on the key turn. So like you almost always want to have initiative so that you can tech DJ them first, or even if you're not tech DJing, that you can like DJ their resource and make it so that they don't have 7 after they attack with Han, which usually will delay either the Han unit or the DJ from them. So a lot of it's that. A lot of it is drawing cunning as well. Like it's kind of it's gonna usually end up to who drew better, but sometimes it'll just be who played better. So
all right, villain green blue, Kira Krennic can be Palp.
tech, it's a free win.
Well, it's
I
not just that.
literally
If it's ECL, if you start Falcon, it's really good because you put them so behind in tempo, you start hitting them. I think
Yeah.
I explained the like Falcon sequence where it's like they power it, you don't care, you know. So
I also
Falcon's a
think
huge card.
my version with the droids is like insane against them because Power of the Dark Side is functionally just not a card when I get to sack these droids
One of
that
the best
have
cards in
already
the deck,
done
yeah.
something.
And I think some of the people running those decks are not putting enough space units too, so you might have an opening there.
Their space is so weak, just the way the deck is built right now. But
Right.
we'll
Yeah.
see what
But
what is
I think
play.
Tech literally single-handedly solos them. Super Laser Blast doesn't do anything to this deck. You get to rebuild your board immediately, and it's just like they got time warped. So
All right. What about Villain Green Red? Did you run into Bosk? I mean, some
I did.
some
I
did
played-
well. Yep. And it's
I
a good,
played a bunch.
good matchup for
Right.
you, I would think.
Kind of.
Okay.
The values
Yeah.
don't do anything to Falcon. That's the big thing, but ramp is tough.
It's interesting. So I played at Baltimore. I played against 3 different boss decks on the second day, and then I played against Bosk like 2 or 3 times total over the course of 3 days. It's definitely favored for Han, I think, but it can be really annoying. You have to be a little worrisome about the Bosk flip turn, especially if they have the free 3-drop bounty. And being able to double that can kind of swing the tempo in their favor, depending on how much damage you've done to the base already. But obviously, like, Cunning's the best card in that matchup, too, just because they'll play a lot of things that, like a Super Laser Tech or something, and you get to just bounce it +4. They're just, like, set back a turn now, they're not ramping. So I think it's definitely favored, especially if they're running ECL, but you have to watch out. My buddy has a version of it that's kind of... It took a lot of games off me where he's playing, like, IG-11 and Kylo Unit as ECL targets, and those are both really good.
And Kylo Unit is very strong with ECL. I mean,
Yeah,
we
he's playing like Consortium Star Viper to get off the bounty thing that gets 3 drops, and then Kylo can give it +2 and experience, and then it can just like eat your Falcon. So there's like certain versions of it that can be really good. I feel like he definitely built that version with my deck in mind.
well, no, like I said, Vader's usually a pretty good matchup into mono Han. I mean, it's problems elsewhere.
Well, it's the ramp. Like all the cunning decks struggle with ramp because like your
Right.
tempo hits the wall, and if you get like ECL battalioned over, like you're really far behind at that point. Your deck like no longer is as good.
Another card Kylo Unit can buff.
Yeah.
All right.
In testing, just real quick, in testing for Baltimore, one of the things that I was testing a bunch against was green ECL Boba, which is slightly different than what you had mentioned, but the kind of game plan of playing around ECL and stuff came up, and I kept losing to it. And what I realized is you just don't actually deploy Han on the 5 resource turn. You just wait a turn, because a lot of times they're gonna wait and they'll like do a soft pass because they want you to deploy your leader, and then you just get the claim.
All right. Boba Green, there's good versions of that too. One did very well day 3.
Yeah.
Which should come up right now, you would think. Green Palp. This was present at Gencon significantly. You both felt pretty comfortable with the matchup?
Yeah, it took a while for me to get comfortable with it. I thought it was like a really bad matchup for Han at first, but I was just playing it wrong. New Adventure helps a lot, so I would definitely put it in your sideboard if you're not running it main.
Why?
The other thing...
What does New Adventure do?
Yeah, so New Adventure, when they steal something with either a Traitorous or with Palpatine's ability when he deploys, they'll steal something, and then you can New Adventure that card that they stole, and now you get it back on your side. So it's a huge tempo swing back into your favor. I think Traitorous is like an unplayable card against this deck. Like if you're playing a deck with Traitorous, you need to just take it out of your deck post board because we have bounces and New Adventures and stuff to just keep punishing you when you steal our stuff. But the biggest thing that I had a struggle with against Palp was the 3/5 Sentinel and Scanning Officers. And so if you can build your deck in a way that isn't super soft to Scanning Officer and has ways to deal with a 3/5 unit, you'll have a lot better of a time.
All right. And Bounce does similar things to New Adventure, just not as effective.
Yeah, getting the card back immediately without having to spend extra resources is really backbreaking.
All right, so that's the meta. Both of you guys did very well at the large events. Tell me about how you would actually prepare, for an event like this, like a big Gen Con. How how did you prepare? And if different, how would you actually recommend doing it for players? What are
Or you
you
can go
try?
first if you want.
I mean, my preparation, I've kind of gone over it a little bit right here. It was pretty scuffed. I didn't have a whole ton of time to test, but I mean, the biggest thing, right, is to just evaluate the field, and then you have to try your deck into everything you expect, right, and then make some concessions, right. You always have to find one matchup to concede. In this case, I felt comfortable conceding Mono Boba a little bit, just because I didn't expect most players to know how to play that matchup, and I turned out to be correct. I played 4, I think, Mono Boba over the weekend, and beat all of them. So that was kind of a good conclusion to come to there. Yeah, and then just like always having like problem solving deck building and making sure that when you're testing, you're not just running games mindlessly. You have like specific things that you're looking out for. Even like during the tournament, I was counting every time I had Han unit in hand. Like, would this be better if it was Fennec? And there were 3 times where like I'm just staring down a Boba leader, like, oh yeah, I'm gonna check my grave. Oh, 1, 2, 3. Dang, if this was a Fennec, I could kill that guy. But because it's Han unit, I'm just gonna sit here and die, I guess. You know, so like always having specific questions in mind. That's like one of the most important things about testing, and having like specific things that you're trying to accomplish.
And track random things during the tournament too. What about you, Ian? How do you get ready for one of these?
So I like to do a lot of testing for tournaments that I know are coming up. So like for Baltimore, I tested for like a month straight trying to find the best deck to go into that event. Thought I found it. Think I was vindicated on that. The Gencon tournament, I actually went to Gencon not expecting to be able to play it. So like I didn't even make changes to my deck outside of like changing a third Aztec gunship for a second Syndicate lackey. So like I didn't really change anything, but obviously I changed after talking with some people in my testing group about what cards to try out in a new version, and did well with it, kind of on the fly. But all of the testing from Baltimore kind of gave me the like jump start on being able to play that version of the deck, especially because I had played a Rebel package in Han in set 1 before, so like I was familiar with those cards and the play patterns with them already. But generally for tournaments, I like to try to prepare a lot. I work a lot, so it's like kind of difficult sometimes. But it's just play the problem matchups, have a good friend that you can test hard matchups with. Hopefully that they're on a similar skill level as you or even higher. Like I have a friend who I think is vastly better at the game than me. So it's a great person to play with because he's going to kick my ass most of the time.
You learn more from your loses than your wins.
Exactly.
And
that was kind of like what I was saying earlier about like I kept losing to Sabine until I realized that I can just like race them because they're a 25 health base, and I'm just gonna cunning and +4 every single time, and I was just trying to control their board too much, and it was just a losing game. So eventually you'll figure those kind of things out, but you need to give yourself time to do that, especially in this game where there are so many decision points. Kind of like I said, that it's very similar to chess. It's like know your practice openings, practice mulligan decisions, practice resource decisions on turn 1. Those things like actually matter a lot, where like in other card games it might not. So
you might call it the Tech DJ Gambit. That'd probably be the correct terminology. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. I think this was great. Any final words? Why don't we leave it with this? What are your final words to the aspiring Mono Han player? Start with you, Troy.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the most fun decks that you'll play. Like, if you're just looking for a deck that will help you improve at the game, this one has like a ton of decisions to make, and it really puts you into control. Makes you feel like, okay, every time I'm kind of picking up this deck, I'm improvising with it. Even if you have a kind of a streamlined game plan, every game is different. So it's one of the most enjoyable decks to play. I think every deck that plays Han Leader, you just have like twice as many options as every other single deck. So it's a testing deck. It's a very fun deck. I would encourage everyone to give it a shot at least once.
All right, Ian, take us home.
yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. I think that one of the cool things about this deck too is now with the expanded card pool, there's probably versions of it that myself or Troy haven't thought of, or card choices that we haven't thought of. I think that there's totally merit in trying to find a version that plays McClunky and has an Underworld package. I haven't been able to figure out the exact version of that yet, but who knows? It might be out there.
Might need a Fennec too, from the way it looks.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of cool things with this deck. It also has a broken combo that will just win the game sometimes, which is always a recipe for success. And you get to play Cunning, which is one of my favorite cards. So it's a lot of fun. You do a lot of broken things. You just need to make sure you never fall behind, because if you do, it's a little bit hard to catch up on.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is a wrap of the Mono Ham Masterclass. Thank you very much, Ian and Troy. And thank you, everybody, for watching. If you listen this far,
Pleasure.
yep, you're a hero.
Thank you.
Thanks, Loopy. Thanks, Troy.